everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. This week, we're diving into the history of Elizabethan England by asking, did Shakespeare use hand lotion? We're all washing our hands a lot more these days, especially with the pandemic going on, and that dries out your skin. So consequently, me and my family have also been using a lot of hand lotion in addition to soap and water. And that got me thinking, did Shakespeare have this available to him? Did he use hand lotion? So I went looking, and it turns out hand lotion dates back well into ancient times. This was something that civilizations all over the world have had to conquer, is the idea of cracked skin and knuckles and your skin being all dried out and needing to put something on it to bring moisture back into your skin. Early major developments in hand lotion used ingredients like oil or beeswax or rose water. That was all used by the Romans. The Bible mentions oil and frankincense and myrrh. And along with the biblical precedents of using oil specifically as a balm or an anointing oil, these approaches to lotion and skin cream seem to have a strong foundation in history, leading well up to well before William Shakespeare ever arrived on the scene. But it was still a major industry in Elizabethan England when Shakespeare was writing, and we can see that in some of his works. There's one sonnet where he talks about the various practices of being beautiful. It's often called one of Shakespeare's dark lady sonnets, but he says, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more fair than her lips are fair. If snow be white, why then her breast is done? If hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks." Now that particular sonnet's kind of contrasting the beauty of this woman with the beauty standards of the day, as opposed to espousing her particular beauty in particular. And there's a lot of poetic analysis you could do there about Shakespeare's sonnet in general. But the point is, you can see some comparisons to what constituted beauty and what the products were that helped you achieve that kind of beauty. For most of Elizabethan England, having pale skin for a woman was considered the most desirable thing to have. It was sought after, and people would actually create whitening creams to try and make their skin whiter, even going so far as to actually bleach their skin. Now, this makes sense in the age of things like smallpox and disease and trying to smooth over some of the issues you would have on your skin. Remember, they didn't have sunscreen yet at this time in history, so there was probably a lot of skin damage and other things that they were trying to conquer, pretty much just like today. You know, you're weathered and you're aging and you're trying to put creams on your body to slow that down or make it better. They did that in William Shakespeare's lifetime as well. Now, taking care of your skin involved a lot of interesting ingredients in Renaissance England. And while whitening your skin to look specifically pale was something for women as opposed to men like William Shakespeare, moisturizers and lotion was used by all genders. So for this episode, when we're diving into Elizabethan England, I wanted to look specifically at moisturizers and lotions in particular, but there is a whole world of makeup that is totally worth looking into if you're interested in the cosmetics of Renaissance England. Also, if you have done research into the delineation between cosmetic products for men and cosmetic products for women, and you have more information on that, please post it in the comments below and let me know, because I was not able to find whether or not a general moisturizer would have been made this kind for men versus an alternative kind for women. All of the references to moisturizers and lotions that I found were universal in that way. They were just for moisturizing and anyone could use them. There is an ointment made of roses that I found from, now this comes from, I'm going to read it to you. This is a John Patridge from, I believe this is 1586. I will check my dates and link you to the sources in the show notes so that you can make sure I'm saying the date right. But it's John Patridge, and he talks about, to make an ointment of roses, you, quote, take oil of roses 4 ounces, white wax 1 ounce, melt them together over seething water, then chafe them together with rose water and add a little white vinegar. Voila, then you have an ointment of roses. Another way of saying that is rose lotion. Rose oil must have remained a popular choice because by the time the Countess of Arundel was writing her recipe in 1655, after the life of William Shakespeare, she was still suggesting rose oil and olive oil be used as a moisturizer. Her recipe is basically an infusion of rose petals in olive oil. She has you put it in a glass, seal the glass, and then heat it up, and then it sits there till it cools down. It's exactly if you've ever made like rosemary infused olive oil or garlic infused olive oil to cook with. She's doing the exact same thing except with rose petals. So she's making this rose infused olive oil. I can only imagine that had a lot to do with how they wanted it to smell, but it was probably also because the rose petals were considered really great for the skin. So she's doing kind of both things here. And she lists at the bottom of her recipe that you can follow this process with a variety of other herbs. I didn't have time to go and look and see if there were other herbs that were infused with olive oil specifically for the skin, but rose oil infused with olive oil was definitely used as a lotion in the late 17th century. There's another recipe from the 16th century. This comes from what Daniel Nunn Weinberg, for her blog, created for actually Renaissance reenactors, cites a 16th century conversation manual. There's two women talking to each other, and they're talking about the various products that they like to use. And one of the common lotion recipes that they reference uses Malmsey wine, white vinegar, honey, lily flowers, fresh beans, verdigris, white silver, rock salt, sandiver, rock alum, and sugar alum, and then every element distilled in a limebeck. So apparently, every element distilled in a limebeck was commonly enough known that they didn't feel like they needed to list them all off one at a time. But that recipe struck me as incredibly involved. You've got the Countess of Arundel writing her lotion is just two ingredients, you put them together and voila, you're done. This one is actually a lot more involved, and the recipe uses the quote at the bottom to say, this lotion is very expensive, but it's very, very good. So it seems like even the same as today in the 21st century, the more expensive lotions were considered better than the less expensive ones. Throughout the High Middle Ages and right through to the Renaissance, skincare treatments combined medicinal herbs and superstitious practices. If you've ever watched the show Outlander, where Claire, who is a doctor that goes back in time and ends up in the 17th, 18th century shopping to find her medicines, she goes into the apothecary shop and orders her herbs, and she's quite frequently under suspicion for being a witch because of the various herbs and spices that she buys, and then she mixes them together. Often the idea of a lotion and a potion got intermixed, and there was not a lot of delineation between the two things. And that reality that's depicted on the show is not too far from what would have been going on in William Shakespeare's lifetime as well. There was a very close association between medicine and cosmetics because apothecaries were where you got herbs for anything. So whether you're going in there to make your makeup or you're going in there to make your medicine, it's the same herbs, same apothecary shop. So these herbs were often crushed up and made into a paste and soaked or combined with other ingredients like milk. Donkey's milk was particularly popular, vinegar or wine, and you'd put the herbs in there to create like a paste and then rub it over your face. They would have been put over your face or your body to treat your skin with this poultice, and depending on what exactly combination of ingredients you were using determined how long you left it on there and different things like that. But then, like today, there were these favorite recipes and essentially, a brand that people enjoyed more than others. And there were even some combinations of these ingredients which were thought to give you magical powers or accomplish things that are well beyond the capabilities of things like rose petals. For instance, they thought if you use this particular combination of herbs, your deformities will completely go away, like genetic deformities. They would completely go away. Didn't work for the Habsburgs. Pretty sure it's not going to work for you. But that's what they said. And then they also thought that if you put magical amulets in with the lotion, like amethyst specifically, that now you have magical powers. So you see there was this huge overlap between these two industries in Elizabethan England. Now, popular ingredients known to be specifically good at moisturization without the magical properties included things like frankincense, myrrh, anise, and walnut bark. Also, honey and milk, and Malmsey in particular, were very popular as lotions. All of these things go back to Roman times and sort of historical records for lotions. Hippocrates wrote a lot about how honey was a great moisturizer, and an archaeology team from London went back and found a canister from the 2nd century that contained lotion, and they said it smelled a lot like sulfur, and when they tested it, it was primarily animal fat that had been used to make the moisturizer. So there are lots of different recipes, but these were some of the bases. The Bible talks about lotions made from spices and olive oil. There is one recipe that talks about a mask you put on your face that was made of myrrh, egg yolks, aloe, and hot rose oil. Olive oil is another popular one that comes over from the Greeks, and they said that olive oil was particularly good at anti-aging. So if you're in the Elizabethan period and you want that fresh look, you would use olive oil, just like the Countess of Arundel. It can seem hilarious now to think about these lotions and creams consisting of food items like milk and honey. But if you think about what our moisturizers are made of today, a lot of these same ingredients are still used in cosmetics and lotions that we have here in the 21st century. If you're interested to explore this topic further, make sure you check out the show notes for today's episode over at CassidyCash.com/lotion. I've packed a lot of the sources that we used to put this episode together, which makes great places to go and explore this further. There'll be links to scholarly articles that are peer-reviewed and backed up by lots of defense. And then there's other things that are not quite so reliable, like blogs that are interesting nonetheless. And you can find all of that packed over there at CassidyCash.com if you want to explore this further. So if you're doing a research project, or maybe you're in a class and you want to learn something else about Shakespeare and you think this topic of lotions in Elizabethan England might be something fun to explore, that collection of show notes is there to help you get started with that. If you like the history of William Shakespeare, please hit like and subscribe, and be sure to join us here on YouTube every Saturday with even more Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash. That's it for this week. I hope you learned something new about the Bard, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.